Hi guys, so today I am coming to you with a wrap up and TBR video. So I have read quite a few books during June, like way more than I have read in a long time, and to be honest the majority of them I think were like Netgalley books. So I don't know, maybe it's just because I was reading on a different format, like I was reading on my Kindle for quite a lot of the time, that it just felt different and maybe a bit easier to read through things. And also a good quantity of them were also like graphic novel comics kind of things, so it helped me whiz through some stuff. So I've only really got 2 physical books to show you that I read during June, and then as for the TBR section, there's 2 kind of like little read along things that I am hoping to join in with, so I'll just show you the books that I hope to read for those later on. But for now, let's just start with the wrap up. So as I said, I did read quite a few things. I think I got about 12 books read, which is like kind of crazy. I know some of them were like, I guess, easier reads, I suppose, being like more about like sequential art or whatever it's called, graphic novels pretty much, but still I'm really happy that I got so much done. So unfortunately the first book that I read I can't really talk too much about because it's the last book in a trilogy, but that is Library of Souls by Ransom Rigg. This is the 3rd in the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children trilogy. I've done a trailer review kind of thing for the film. If you guys want to watch that, I'll leave that somewhere for you to go and view. And I've also got a review that I'm not sure when I'm actually going to upload it yet, but I do indeed have a review for this series. So I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I don't want to speak too much about it just because I have gone in more depth in the actual review, but it was my least favourite, I believe, out of the 3 books, but it was still really enjoyable and I would definitely recommend this trilogy to anybody. The next thing I read was a comic that I received in my geek box that I did an unboxing of one time, and this is Empress by Mark Millar and Stuart Immonen, I believe that's how it's pronounced. This is about a empress on this kind of like sci-fi galaxy world thing who's got more of like an evil tyrant king husband. She doesn't like the system and the way things are done on that planet, and because she's got kind of like young children, she decides, you know what, I'm going to leave this place, I'm going to try and sneak out and take my kids with me so we can hopefully have a bit of life. And this first issue was kind of just about that and setting the world and stuff. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I mean, it's a pretty decent first issue, but the reason I don't really pick up single issues is because I feel like I need to immerse myself in like at least a volume of something before I can say whether or not I really enjoy something and would like to continue. Because it was a single issue, I struggled to really kind of give it a proper review, but I mean it was decent enough, as I said, for, you know, setting the world and kind of like the main plot drive for a series. From just this tiny little snippet that I got to read, it's definitely something that I would enjoy reading, but I don't think it'd be that high on my TBR list, you know, when or if they decide to have a collective bind up of the comics. It's just, I don't know, it's just not something that could like easily be drawn into, but it is still interesting. As I said, it was a decent first issue. It got a lot of action in it, a lot of kind of ideas for where the plot was going, so yeah, check this out if you're into kind of like sci-fi comic-y sort of things. Okay, now on to some of the Netgalley books. I'd like to say thank you to the publishers and Netgalley in general for letting me read these books. Of course, none of my opinions are altered or anything like that because I received them to read for free, but yeah, just so you guys know. The first book that I read from Netgalley was Labyrinth Lost by Zordaya Cordova. Oh, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. This is about a young Bruja or Bruja, I'm not too sure how to pronounce it. Basically, it's kind of like a witch. I think it's taken a lot of concepts from the Latin American kind of beliefs and stuff like that, merged in with like, you know, your average urban fantasy. So it's about Alex. She's a young kind of witch, and she is coming up to her death day, which is basically when you begin to show signs of your powers. You have like this kind of day to like celebrate, but at the same time, like, they line it up against your birthday as well, so it's a big celebration, but at the same time it's also grounding your powers and making them less out of control. So it's about that, and she basically doesn't want her powers. She's holding this back from her family, and she does this big surprise. Basically the results are her family is gone. She's gotten rid of her family by accident and she has to try and get them back. So I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It had me flying through it in a matter of days. I loved that it had kind of Latin American influences in it. It had kind of power of magic, the power of love. It just had some really great ideas thrown into it that really worked. I know this might sound a little bit, I don't know, controversial to some of you, but it was really nice reading from the perspective of an ethnic person, because a lot of these days you see in like young adult fantasy or whatever, it's always from like a Caucasian perspective, or a lot of the stuff that I read tends to be. And I think it's nice that you've got some other cultures being added into. You're reading from a point of view of someone else from a different culture, and they're not following, you know, stereotypical behaviours, if that makes sense. So I think it's really nice to read things like that, that kind of widens your perspective of the world, even though these are fictional characters, if you know what I mean. I felt like Alex was a really strong character, and the side characters that were included in this story really helped to get the plot going, move things along, and they themselves were also really strong as individuals. Like, they weren't just holding up the main character, they all had their own thing going on, if that made sense, which was great. Some obviously more than others, but generally they were all like well-rounded characters, and I'd be interested to read from multiple perspectives because they were all really interesting to hear about from Alex's point of view. Early on I did have suspicions about the kind of result for certain characters. I don't want to spoil anything. Still, I was thrown completely off the scent by this like plot twist. It just went completely crazy, but it was great. So I'm glad that although I thought initially it was going to be predictable, it still had elements of surprise that I really enjoyed. There were some really odd things. I don't know if that was just because it was like the Kindle kind of formatted it weird, but if you want to read my Goodreads review, feel free to do that, because I go into depth a little bit about some of the uncomfortabilities of me reading it, if that makes sense, like the way it was laid out. As usual, my Goodreads link is kind of down below, so just, you know, click on that if you'd like. All in all, I think this would actually make an awesome film. Like, I could really visualize everything that was going on, and I think it would be like executed wonderfully if it was a movie. So I would totally recommend this book. I thought it was great. I thought it was interesting. I'd love to see where the story takes us in the further books, because I do know it's the first book of a series. I'm not sure if it's a trilogy or a duology or what, but I know there's more books to come. So I'm really excited to look out for those, and I totally recommend it if you haven't read it yourself. Then this next book, some of you guys might have seen in my recent unboxing and June book haul. This is Thrive by Camilla Shane, or Chain, I'm still not sure how to pronounce her name. But yeah, I did get a physical copy from her that I talk a little bit about in that video if you want to check it out. But I did read this originally through Netgalley, so on like an ebook form. It's basically like a eco-living kind of self-help book to kind of get you into the mentality of thriving ultimately, and it's definitely something that I needed to read now. I'd never read like a self-help book before, and I kind of felt like I was in the moment to kind of digest that sort of thing, and it really did help me and impact me a lot. So I gave that a 4 out of 5 stars, and I just want to say quickly, the cover is absolutely beautiful, and since receiving a physical copy, as some of you might have seen in that video, that she does suggest, like, if you have a physical copy, you can colour in the illustrations that run throughout it, which is just amazing, and also just adds to that kind of, I don't know, easygoing lifestyle, that nice relaxation and stuff that she kind of talks to you about in the book. So I thought that was a nice little thing to add as well. I just felt like I learnt so much from reading that book, and I'm so shocked that it's Camilla's debut novel. Like, it was written so well, and it really drove its points across. Like, it was so insightful, it really was. I did enjoy it thoroughly. I even sent a copy to my dad. He received it today, and I can't wait to see what he thinks about it. It was definitely user friendly, especially in the terms of having kind of like subheadings within chapters. It kind of just broke it down in easy to read chunks, especially for someone who's not read a self-help book before. It wasn't overwhelming or anything like that. It was very manageable, digestible kind of chunks to read through, and I really appreciated that. Tell that it was really well researched. Some points did feel a little bit preachy, but generally it was a really nice laid back, just helpful, wanting to help kind of book. You could really hear the passion in the author's voice as she was like writing this. At times, like with some of the stuff that I had learnt a little bit about in uni, it did feel a little bit boring, a little bit like a lecture, but honestly that was just like a really minute part, and that's only because I felt like I already knew that, if you know what I mean. Generally, the book was amazing. I really did enjoy it. I felt like it's opened up my perspective a little bit more, kind of made me think about things, you know, materialistic things. Do I really need them? That kind of thing. It's just made me more aware, I feel. Hopefully that feeling lasts a really long time. So I totally recommend this if you're kind of wanting to, you know, lessen your life stress, you know what I mean, kind of make your life more light and happy. And yeah, it was a really good book. And then I read a comic that was kind of sent to me. I think it's still free because the author's kind of having like, read this for free if you like, kind of. I don't know how long it's lasting for. It's A/D Dissension Part 1 by Aaron, I don't know how to pronounce his first name, McGowan. He's also written Elpis, which is what I've been wanting to read for a while. He also gave me that as a free to read ebook, but I haven't got around to that yet. So I thought I'd pick this up maybe to kind of ease myself into what his writing style's like and just to see where this story went, pretty much. So this is kind of based post World War III, following like this police station, but apparently it's like everything's located under the water now. I don't know if it's in some kind of dome or what, but I'm assuming the events of this World War III has made it so everyone has to live a really different lifestyle. Anyway, this particular police station is kind of like taken hostage, and the small group of police officers that like are away from all that sort of stuff are trying to figure out how to stop this, how to make everything safe again, and kind of go on from there, I guess. Now, I gave this a 2 stars, and I don't really want to go in too much depth because I am hoping to do a kind of joint review of this and Aaron, sorry, his other book Elpis. When I get around to reading it, I'll just put them into like one video and review them together. So I am just going to leave it kind of there. Hopefully you'll see a review emerging in somewhere in the near future. So yeah, did I say it was a graphic novel? I don't know, but yeah. So on to the next book. I think the next books but one are all Netgalley books now, so I'll just let you know when that one book is not a Netgalley book, if that makes sense. So the next book I was eager to get to was Nina Is Not Okay by Shappi Khorsandi, who's actually a comedian I had not heard of, I don't think, until I had read this book and realised that she was a comedian. I also have a review that is coming out at the end of July, I believe, because it's not released until the 28th, I think. But anyway, my review will be up on that date. It's kind of like a spoiler free review and then like a spoilery discussion afterwards. Probably not many of you will be able to watch the whole of that video until maybe you decide to go out and buy the book or whatever, but still it'll be interesting for you to hear my thoughts, maybe, I don't know. So this is about a girl called Nina who's currently at college. She's doing like her A-levels and she's not dealing with life very well. She definitely has some sort of drinking problem, and there are a lot of themes you would not expect, well at least I didn't expect to encounter throughout this book. It went to places that I was so shocked about, but ultimately I love this, and if you stick around for that review at the end of July, you'll see why I loved it so much. I actually gave this a 5 stars, and I think this is the first 5-star book that I've read in such a long time. It was that amazing, and yeah, as I said, I've got a review coming, so I don't want to talk too much about this, but it was a great book. I think it's something that really needs to be read. It was amazing. Next, I picked up Thor, Dueling with Giants, Marvel's Tales of Asgard. I think it's part 1 of a trilogy by Keith R.A. DeCandido. So this got a 3.5 stars from me. It's about Thor, obviously. He's on his own, you know, home turf. He's on Asgard. He's got to deal with some troublesome trolls, some giants, and it's just a big adventure kind of book. I had honestly gone into this thinking it was a comic, because when I got a newsletter through from Netgalley, I swear it was features on new comics to read or whatever, and I was like, oh cool, yeah, I'll download that and read it. It wasn't a comic. I really was in the mood to read something light and just something easy to get through, and honestly this took me a long time to read, and I think that's why. It's because I was so put off by the fact that it wasn't a comic and it was just another kind of dense piece that I'd read too many dense things so far, you know, so I wanted something easy, and I didn't get that, so I was a little bit salty at the fact that it's another book. But really, it was a good novel. It wasn't anything exceptional, but it wasn't like really shitty, you know what I mean? I probably wouldn't go out of my way to buy a copy or continue on necessarily with the trilogy, but it was a decent read. I did enjoy it. Although I didn't find any kind of major connection with the characters, I enjoyed pretty much all characters, both good and evil. I didn't have any discrimination there. I just didn't really find a major connection and investment into the story. Overall, yeah, it was a good book, but as I said, I wouldn't go out of my way to continue on. And then I read The Lion, which is the 3rd volume in the Love series, I think it's called, by Frederick Bremaud and Federico Bertolucci. I don't know if I've pronounced that really terribly or what, but yeah, this is a series of graphic novels following a different kind of wild animal in the wild. So it had a really interesting concept to me, and I was really eager to pick this up, but because it was the 3rd in a series, I didn't know if I had to read the other ones beforehand. But apparently someone said to me it was fine to just jump into it. They didn't really connect or anything like that. It wasn't one of those kind of stories. So I went ahead and I just dived into it, and I was pretty glad that I did. It was an interesting one to read. So the main reason I gave it a 3 stars is because I really enjoyed the artwork. I felt like the artist showed a real keen interest in the anatomy of the animals, and I felt like they were pretty well accurate, if that makes sense, to what they would look like in the wild. Obviously we had some expressions that were maybe a little bit more expressionate for us to understand what they were trying to say, because there isn't any speech in this. It's just literally kind of like it's like you're kind of reading a movie, if that makes sense. I feel like this will be an amazing movie. Again, I know I keep mentioning that, but the colours and everything, it was beautiful. It was really beautiful. So the only thing that I have the drawback on is really the story. I feel like this is one of those interpretation kind of pieces, as is another thing that I'll mention later on. And I always struggle with those sort of things. I didn't really understand the flow of the story. I didn't really get what was going on entirely. As I said, I really struggle to pick up things easy if it's kind of suggested at, rather than told outright that this is what it's supposed to be, you know. I don't grasp things easily. But in saying that, if you don't have a problem with that kind of thing, I think you'd love this, especially if you're really into your animals, like wildlife and stuff like that. I think this would be a beautiful book for you to pick up. I would be interested in going back and looking at the other 2 books before this, because I think it would be really pretty to just have in my room and go and flick through it every so often. And I think with this sort of book, over time I might be able to understand a bit more and kind of grasp some more ideas about what this could mean for me, maybe. But yeah, it was enjoyable. I just wish I understood it better than I did. Then I read a comic bind up. This is Black Magic Volume 1 Awakening Part 1 by Greg Rucka and illustrated by Nicholas Scott. This is about Rowan Black, who is a detective, but she's also a witch, and you're just reading about her events, trying to keep that a secret, but also trying to be the best she can be at her job. And you know, there's some supernatural elements going into it, so it was pretty cool. I gave this a 4-star, and I thought it was absolutely amazing. Honestly, I've never been so immersed in a police story. I think even if it didn't have the elements of like fantasy, you know, her being a witch and everything, I think I still would have enjoyed it just because of the way it was written. Now, I've heard a little bit about Greg Rucka's work being kind of dismissed as being poor and rubbish and that sort of thing in quality, but I've never read anything by him, at least not that I'm aware of, and this being the first thing that I've read, regardless of what people have said against him, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really strong written piece. I felt like it fit perfectly being, you know, a comic. Like, it worked wonderfully, the way it was written and everything, along with the illustrations, and I thought it was a great piece. So yes, I will probably go and hunt down some more of his stuff to see what people are trying to say, you know, in terms of him usually being a bad writer or whatever. I don't really know, but I would like to see more from him and kind of dive into more of his other stuff. In saying all that anyway, the character arcs weren't that well developed. We're mainly just kind of learning about Rowan Black and her story, so everyone surrounding her is kind of almost left in the background. I mean, they're detailed enough for, you know, a first volume, but, you know, honestly, we're looking at Rowan Black in this first volume. We're looking at her story. We're looking at what's so special about her and her life and everything like that, which I understood, and I don't hate it for it, you know. The side characters were still fleshed out enough, so they weren't dull or boring. I will say there were some characters that were speaking in like German and French. Although I feel like you could have easily have left it alone and just carried on with, you know, what you was reading, I literally Google translated everything that they were saying because I wanted to know everything that was going on. That's how immersed I was in the story. I wanted to see every little detail, and I think that helped me a little bit with knowledge. But honestly, as I said, I feel like you could easily have just, you know, blazed over that and carried on with the story. In terms of the illustrations, they were beautifully drawn. It really looked like the characters' faces were almost like photoshopped in and edited to make it look like it was drawn in. That's how detailed and really awesome it was. And I love the attention to detail of the general overlay being kind of like a grey, black and white design, but whenever magic was used, that was a spark of colour, and I thought that was really, really great, and it just helped the experience reading it. I really enjoyed it. Then I read Ghostbusters International by Eric Burnham. I gave this a 2-star, and it was just okay, you know. So in this one, we're basically following the Ghostbusters being kind of not bought out, but kind of sold a little bit every couple of months. They do international jobs and stuff, so we're just following like their first few adventures in a different country, busting out ghosts pretty much. It didn't really stand out to me. There was nothing exceptional going on. I mean, I did feel a little bit lost at times, and I couldn't really understand all of the jokes, even though generally it was quite funny. I've watched the original Ghostbusters movie, but I haven't read anything to do with it, anything like that. So I don't know if I was supposed to or not. There was some footnotes that suggested you could check out this certain issue if you wanted to understand more about what's going on. So I did feel a bit left in the dark in terms of, I don't know, just the storyline in general, I guess, because I do feel like there were a few references that I didn't have a clue what was about. The drawing generally was really interesting, but particularly for the Ghostbusters themselves, in comparison to other characters, they were drawn like really silly. They looked really goofy, and I can't remember her name, but the one that's like their receptionist, and also this girl that kind of works in this occult shop, I think it is, they looked goofy as well, and it just didn't make sense with the rest of the characters. It looked really silly and out of place. Yeah, maybe it's better suited to people that are already hyped up in that kind of franchise. For me, I'm not really too into it. I enjoyed the movie, but it doesn't really go any further than that, to be honest. So yeah, it was kind of a okay, mediocre kind of read for me. Okay, we're on to the last 2 books now. This one I received from the author. I'm not going to speak too much about it because I have a review coming up soon. This is House Trap by Mark Morther. It's about a 16-year-old girl called Rachel who's really trying to keep up her grades and, you know, try and get a good place in college. And then she gets loaded on with more work. She has to help out this girl who's been missing a bit of school recently and kind of help tutor her, but she's a really kind of snobby, like cheerleader kind of girl, and you know, Rachel's not looking forward to wasting her time and helping her out. But as soon as she gets into this house and realises who this family is, she gets super excited. But then events occur and she realises that there are people that are trying to kill her there. It really escalates. So I gave this a 2.5 stars. I'll explain more for my reasons there in that video, but you can also check out my Goodreads review because I think I've mentioned more in the review written than in the video review. So yeah, on to the last book that I read during June. That was Pop Gun War Gift by Farrell Dalrymple. This was another Netgalley book that I got. So this was, in my opinion, another kind of interpret it as you will kind of graphic novel, and as I mentioned before, I really struggle with that sort of thing. It's got a lot of themes about kind of childhood, finding yourself, just a lot of themes thrown into there. But the general basis of the story is it's following a young boy called Sinclair. He gets kind of picked on quite a lot by people around him, and he hasn't got the best of home life sort of thing. And anyway, he finds a pair of discarded angel wings and he sticks them on his back and flies around his little town, you know, doing things and getting on in life, I suppose. I gave this a 3.5 stars, but it's kind of on like the lowest spectrum of the 3.5 stars. So if you see my Goodreads review, it will just say 3 stars, if that makes sense, rather than sometimes I might put it in the 4-star category, but it's still a 3.5, if that makes any sense. I don't really do the 3.75 malarkey because, I don't know, I feel like that confuses me, but the way I do it is probably even more confusing than that. I did give it a good rating, and that might shock you because I didn't really understand what was going on. And I don't know, I just feel like it left me with so much emotion. It was so beautifully done, but it was just so weird, you know. There was a lot of random things going on. It was kind of like a piece of bizarre literature, so I kind of class it as bizarro, if that makes sense. And if I class it as that, I can kind of appreciate it more, because I know it's just not stupid, it's actually, that's intended to be like that. At least that's how I see it. But there's a lot of different characters that you're kind of following in this. I particularly liked Sinclair and Addison, and I felt like everyone kind of had their own little story. Everyone was like detailed enough, if that makes sense, even though you're really following Sinclair and his little life. But yeah, I like the characters. I think they were really interesting to read from. I liked the art style a lot. Specifically the oil pastel looking designs of Sinclair. Sinclair looked really sad anyway, but I feel like drawn in that way, it just really hit me in the emotions. Like, I felt really sad looking at it. Like, it had so much emotion in just a simple little illustration, you know. So I feel like the art style there was absolutely beautiful and complemented the story beautifully. Again, even though I didn't really understand it, I think I would happily buy it and kind of read it and read it and read it, and maybe understand a little bit more as I'm reading it over and over again. I go into a bit more detail in my Goodreads review, so again, check that out if you'd like. But yeah, that got a 3.5 star from me. So those are all the books that I read during June. I've really had a pretty decent reading month. Like, I enjoyed a lot of what I read, to be honest, so I'm excited to start off July again, hopefully with some more good books. But I have some resits to do for my exams, so I need to revise. Yeah, I'm struggling with uni, I really am. But anyway, let's go on to the books that I hope to read during July. So I am hopefully taking part in the A Yearathon theme for July, and that is kind of like your TBR catch up, because it's kind of marking the midpoint of the year and kind of just, you know, getting those books read and trying to reach your goal on that you've set for your Goodreads target. So I think I'm at 30 out of the 60 books. For the longest time I was like 5 books behind schedule, but now I think I'm like 1 book ahead, so I'm making some progress. And so I've just got 4 kind of regular to small books that I hope to get to, maybe some of those during July, just to sort of up my numbers a little bit. So I don't think I'll talk too much about them in depth, just because this video is already so long. But one of the books I want to get to is Demigods and Magicians by Rick Riordan, or Riordan. I never remember how to say his name, guys. He's like one of my favourite authors, and I never know how to say his name. It's been the longest time since I picked up one of his books, and I saw this little bind up of the 3 little novellas crossing over the Kane Chronicles and the Percy Jackson characters, so I really want to pick it up. I've already read the first 2 short stories, and I've got the 3rd one to read, but I'll probably still just go over the whole thing. I think it'll be like a couple of days, maybe even just a whole sitting. Probably could do that in a whole sitting. And yeah, I'm just really excited to jump into this. I always fly through these books, I love them. And then I'm hoping to continue on with Maggie Stavata's Raven Boy cycle. I want to continue on with the Dream Thieves, and I want to continue on with Blue Lily, Lily Blue. This is the 2nd and this is the 3rd. I think I mentioned them in another TBR at one point, but I never got to them. So hopefully I can at least start on one, maybe, because I really did enjoy the first book, and it's been ages since I went back into that world. And then lastly for that little readathon, I want to get to the Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling. I don't think I've ever actually read the Jungle Book, but with the film, you know, recently come out and everything, they've kind of re-advertised, remarketed the books and stuff, and I saw this edition and it looked really nice, and I got it pretty cheap as well. So I'm hoping I'll enjoy this, because I remember seeing the film like years and years ago, like the cartoon one, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, hopefully I enjoyed the book as much as I enjoyed the film. And I've yet to see the live action film. Have any of you seen it? Is it any good? I think my friend Chloe saw it and she really liked it, so I've got to try and see it eventually. And then the last kind of thing for my TBR is I'm taking part, hopefully, in the hashtag readathons, which is between June and October 2016. This is hosted by Riley Marie and some other people that I can't remember at the moment. And basically it's a a Game of Thrones kind of read along. So for June I didn't take part because they were reading a Game of Thrones and I've already read that book and I didn't want to read it again. So I'm jumping in onto July, which is a Clash of Kings, which is the second book in the series. I don't know if I'm going to get to it really because it is big and I'm trying to just read small books at the moment or things on my ebook, but I really do need to kind of tackle this because I read like the first one I think at the beginning of the year or maybe the end of last year and I really loved it, but you know, I need to get back into this world. And I haven't even been watching the series for ages. Like I've not watched series 5 or series 6 and I think series 6 has just finished and everyone's like talking about it, so I'm avoiding all social media if I can. But yeah, I really want to jump back into this world and I hope that the read along will kind of help me and inspire me to do so. So that is it for this kind of wrap up and TBR video. Let me know your favourite book that you read during June and let me know what you're hoping to get to during July. If you have any wrap up and TBR videos that you want to link down below, feel free to do so and I'll get around to watching those for you. But for now I shall speak to you next time. Bye.